Good evening and welcome to Community Forum. I'm your host, Byron Campbell, co-host Chris. Chris, good evening. Good evening, viewers.
Good evening, Byron, and good evening to our viewers. Again, it's a pleasure to have you with us, and we hope that you enjoy this evening's program.
Chris, so this evening we have, viewers, we are discussing budget, of course. Chris and I will be not exploring, but we'll be going through the budget in quite some detail, Chris, the pros and cons and some analysis, yeah? And of course, prior to this, we'll have our regular community review. Did you say chit-chat, Chris?
Chit-chat.
So we'll take a short break here and we'll be right back.
Are you concerned about the impact of climate change on your home or business? The Enhanced Direct Access Climate Adaptation Revolving Fund at the Grenada Development Bank can make your worries a thing of the past. The fund offers concessional financing to households and businesses, focusing on vulnerable populations such as lower-income families and persons with special needs. You could qualify for up to EC $200,000 with an incredibly low interest rate of just 2% annually. With this funding, you can make essential improvements such as building retaining walls for erosion control, making structural improvements to withstand hurricanes, and installing water-efficient bathroom solutions. Take action today. Contact the GDB at 440-2382 to learn more about how you can apply for this funding opportunity. Let's work together to create a climate-resilient nation. The Enhanced Direct Access Project is financed by the Green Climate Fund through the Government of Grenada.
Welcome back, viewers. We have a packed evening, Chris, of discussions. A lot to talk about this evening. Of course, there's budget, as we said, but we're going to leave the budget for after we do our regular and usual chit-chat. Yeah, Chris. Let's start off, Chris, with with COP28, Chris. Of course, this is a major conference dealing with the climate crisis that is at hand right now. We have, I think, it's a rotating delegation in Dubai. Is that, Chris? That all our representatives not there at the same time, but they're there as need be.
Yeah.
Because the Prime Minister was there at one point, and different
That's correct.
sectors are there representing. So that's a good thing. But Chris, critical, and I've been monitoring and following these developments, and for one of the positive things, of course, which poor countries have been asking for, is the establishment of a loss and damage fund. Yeah, we poor countries are asking for $100 billion to start with. The only pledges you have so far is 700,000 or 800,000 million, not even 1 billion. So it's way behind what is expected, but at least it's there to deal with loss and damage, because poor countries are suffering a lot. Africa, the Caribbean, all of us are, and when this happens, and we expect more of it. So that's one of the positives, Chris.
I don't share your view about how positive that is.
Well, I mean, at least there's an acknowledgement and it has started, you know. But the bigger issue, of course, is reaching agreements on phasing out fossil fuel, Chris. And that's where the hurdle is. That's where the problem lies.
And that's where the controversy was.
Yeah.
With COP28.
Yes.
Because the host of COP28, Saudi Arabia, and that area down there, are all about producing oil at a rate where they believe it would not affect CO2 emissions, because the president of the COP28 this year says that the science is showing differently, that fossil fuel burning and the release of CO2 is more about how we could do CO2 capture, and now the whole thing about methane. And methane now is more dangerous than CO2. So you're seeing that there is a pulling back.
And methane, that's the big flares you see.
That's right. That's
burning off in the oil refineries, or where gas, where oil is being
where the
exploded.
gas coming out.
Coming out, yeah.
So it is one of those things that I believe COP28 did not achieve, in my view, we had 1.2 degrees and we're trying to stop at 1.5. I don't get to 1.5 and send the trajectory the other way. But the issue coming out of COP as well is that the amount of money that we expecting to translate for mitigation and adaptation is not there yet, and we still are lagging. Hence the reason I said when you talk about the fund that they just established for
loss and
damage. This is for events like hurricanes.
After it happens,
and then you're not sure what is your access.
That's correct.
And what the access in terms of what your region will get and
that's
all of that.
correct.
So I think we have had many COPs.
Yeah,
and
well, that's the 28th one.
Yeah, and
it's
you're at a point where we still cannot get access to money for the countries that are feeling the brunt of this thing, like ourselves, and how we could do what we have to do. So I believe there is some success in my view, a little bit, and not sufficient. Look at the prediction for 2024 in terms of drought and what is going to happen in the Caribbean region. With the dry season onset, they're predicting a severe and long drought period for us. And they're warning that we need to start preparing ourselves, particularly in agriculture, and how we irrigate and what we do and so on. So there is this quest now to see how, because the dry season is right around the corner.
Well, it's in a month time. It's in a month time.
And it is something that I don't think NAWASA is at a point now with the Green Climate Fund and the projects in terms of storage to see whether they're up to the level where they could help mitigate this thing.
Yeah, Chris, I don't think also, or I think also that I'm bringing this back to the local level. This is a crisis and it's going to affect everyone in various ways. I think that the climate and environmental education information needed in the school curriculum right now. I always ask the question, is our society knowledgeable about this growing climate crisis, you know? What about the future of our children? It's bothersome. It's a big deal. It's a major matter that's going to affect everybody's lives. It's projected that with the melting of the glaciers in the north and south pole, that sea rise will be 7 meters. That is huge.
Yes,
We're losing a big part of our island.
Not only that.
All the beaches are gone. That's the reality of it.
And the agricultural impact. Because a lot of food grows in the low-lying areas. That's correct. And you lose land to salt water and so on, and what happens there.
But also as we deal with this whole climate action, and that's how I like to call it, and there's something called green skills. And in relation to that, the price of green tech is going down also. So, and we'll talk about this in the budget a bit, in terms of what is our local action policy towards this. But it's clearly, it's interesting to see what the final agreement is, the wording of it, because 200 countries at least, and you have to satisfy everybody. So let's see what the final COP28 agreements give. But it is a major concern for the world right now.
Yeah, and I'm not hopeful, because when you look at what's going on in India, India continues to build a number of plants to produce electricity, and they're using coal.
Australia.
Tons of coal.
Australia is exporting a lot of coal.
They have 20-something plants to build in the next year or two, all on coal.
Yeah.
So if India is a country where a major developing country that is continuing in that vein, what does it say about all the COP and what we're doing?
Yeah.
We can't even get them to say, okay, guys, let me change the thing with coal.
Coal, it's true.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, I'm hopeful, but I'm very hopeful.
Optimistic. Yeah. Chris, Guyana and Venezuela, land dispute. This is a major issue of concern. There was an election, well, not an election, a referendum in Venezuela, and according to the reports there, it was overwhelmingly in support of annexation or identifying the Essequibo region, which is about 2/3 of Guyana, by the way. But the problem lies with the colonialists, you know. These loose agreements that were made. But the present situation context is, if Venezuela, the International Court of Justice has ruled and informed Venezuela that it should do nothing to change the status quo for the time being until it has made a formal ruling, a decision on the matter. So my information is that what's released is Guyana is, in fact, if Venezuela go ahead, Guyana is prepared to go to the UN and ask for the invoking article, I think it's 44 and 45, which goes to the Security Council and then is declared. Guyana could then get the United States or any other international body to go to war, to deal with it. This is a very, very...
I don't know if you saw the speech that the President of Guyana given last night. And he has said clearly what they intend to do, which is go to the UN and the Security Council.
Yeah.
But what is even more disturbing, there's a buildup of troops on the border between Venezuela and Guyana and the Essequibo region. And you also have information that the Americans have sent military folks, and military soldiers down there,
soldiers
essentially.
too.
And so you're getting worried that this thing is escalating because Venezuela have stated and given a number of plans. One of them I noted today spoke about the creation of comprehensive defense operational zone. That's what they call it, and in English, which means that they're setting up this defensive zone to deal with what potentially may happen. And the Guyana Defense Force, the GDF, is not backing down as well, and they have support from the US and other countries. The president said he's seeking assistance from the same England and France and Canada to see how they could assist and build. So we're seeing in the world, Byron, Israel, Palestine, and annexation. We see in the world with Russia and Ukraine annexation.
Yes.
And it appears that, Mr. Maduro want to follow the same principles of annexation with this. And what stops annexation, or what gets it to a point of no return is war.
War. Chris, for me, there should be respect for the International Court of Justice. Let them rule, and we should be all prepared to accept that ruling.
Not Venezuela.
I know, but this is where we have to go. Because as Guyana says, in terms of military, if the UN Security Council, they can authorize the use of armed forces by member states to assist in the enforcement orders, So this does not look very good. But you mentioned Palestine. Look, today, or was it yesterday? Today, the UN Secretary General invoked Article 99, which makes it mandatory that the Security Council must deal with the Palestinian issue. This is he has never used this authority yet. So that tells you the extent of the seriousness of this. Remember when the war started, I mentioned, I think that at least 14,000 persons would be killed. Well, it's past that. It's now 16 plus. And such a large percentage being children. 50%. If you women, 60%. If you're counting just children, women and children. This is unacceptable. And the world must find a solution to this, to solve it. We need to stop this.
Does the world listen to the big fellas in the Security Council, the US, the Russia,
that's
the
this
question.
And that?
And that's one of the things I question about the UN. I hear about Article 99, but the issue is, would they listen? I don't think they would. The US have given Israel a blank check in terms of support militarily. Right? Now they're pulling back and they're talking about the issues of they're upset that the wanton killing is going on because Netanyahu is convinced in his mind that the only way to extinguish Hamas is to kill and move everybody out of...
And he's fighting for his political life because he's been charged for corruption.
I don't know how the only way the US could intervene in that is to just cut out military supplies, and you won't see that happening. Because the Jews have a lot of power in the US.
They're saying that this Capitol bombing and this destruction is worse than when the Allied forces were mobbing German cities. This is worse in terms of the level of devastation and destruction and loss of lives. There's no justification for that. In other words, you can't say, I agree, you're going after Hamas, you see them as criminals and terrorists, whatever, but you can't just bomb the city or to kill Hamas because they're people. It makes no sense. There's no logic.
But you see, we need to understand.
That's criminal.
Here is the world sitting in the pavilions taking a look at this. Nobody's, in my view, taking definitive action because they fear the the lashback of the U.S. because the U.S. and their support. So I mean, it's just one of those things where, you know, it is sad.
Chris, yeah, boy, this is
Very
this
sad
is,
in
this
this
is,
time of our advancement in the world, in the
this is,
21st century, and you think, well, we could settle our disputes outside of this kind of.
Chris, of
unwanted
course,
killing.
there is the there's this Samoa Agreement matter that our countries are the human rights issue with it is still there. About, I mean, I saw a clip some time ago where the Minister of Foreign Affairs is like explaining why he was unaware that the agreement was signed by our ambassador, our European ambassador, EU ambassador. For me, I didn't see the.
Well, interestingly enough, on another program,
Yeah.
past Minister of Finance and Foreign Affairs, Anthony Boson, explained it a little better. He said that this signing that they did is like a general signing.
Yeah.
And when you have to come to implement certain aspects of the agreement, as it was in the Cotonou and the Lomé, you have to make sure it goes through your parliament
Yeah.
and it's in tandem with your constitution and so
Yeah.
on. So he was saying that this is not really a thing to worry about.
No,
because
no.
The sections that will come for
Yeah.
sign off, we may
Yeah.
not agree and we may not sign off.
But what was intriguing, I think, why a lot of countries are reluctant to sign on this plan is the human rights aspect of it.
Yeah.
With, in our case, Chris, we in fact, I was looking at a human rights report, the last report we have in Grenada, and they listed as significant this human rights issue: laws criminalizing consensual sexual conduct between men as a human rights issue. And discriminatory because it doesn't do the same for females, for women. So these are some things that we need to look at, and not to, I'm not sure whether it's enforced or not, but it's a human rights issue, Chris.
Yeah, why not? They may list it as a human rights issue. Some of us may have different opinions.
What's your opinion, Chris?
I don't think it's a human rights issue at all.
I think it is.
If you tell me it's a discriminatory issue for
Yeah.
homosexuality with females versus males,
Yeah.
I may tend to look at that as discriminatory because
Right.
what's supposed to be for one should be for the other.
Yeah.
Because when we talk on equal work for equal pay
Yeah.
or equal pay for equal work, we want to get away from the fact that women must be treated differently to men, as being suggested in the minimum wage code that we're going to be putting into law soon.
Okay.
So, I mean, from that perspective, but from the other side of whether, I'm not sure what is the human rights issue here with homosexuals, because in the law, some of us still have laws dealing with the illegality of that and what they probably want to do with that. And, you know, a lot of us may have different views on it, but at the end of the day, I don't know, I'm not sure what is the human rights aspect that is being violated.
Because you're criminalizing consensual sexual conduct between males. That's the issue, Chris.
Yeah. So,
What's criminal about it?
yeah, well what
Is there,
what is not criminal about it?
Chris, I want to move on.
Yes, let's move on.
Due to time, not that I don't want to take you
I want to
on.
put something to you.
Go
Have
ahead.
you ever heard of GARP, Grenada Artificial Reef Project? They are celebrating 10 years, and I think they have done an excellent job in restoring our reefs in the plight of climate change and the acidification of our oceans and all that's
Yeah.
happening with sea rises.
Yeah.
They listed some data of, they have put down 80 pyramids. They do a sort of pyramid thing with concrete blocks. And that has worked well over the last 10 years they have been in existence. And I think we just, you know, give them some kudos that this is a good positive things that's happening
Yeah.
in Grenada, especially around the area of the Grandans Beach and so on, where they're trying to ensure the reefs are regenerating and doing good, and the fisheries are also benefiting from it.
That's not the Grenada Association. How's it called, Chris?
It's called GARP. It's a GARP, just as I suppose Grenada Association of Retired Persons.
Okay.
This one is Grenada Artificial Reef Project,
Okay.
GARP.
So something different.
Yeah, so,
Chris, kudos for that, you know,
Oh,
because
yeah.
because as I mentioned, I'm always in the water, and I'm
That's
seeing a lot of how you call it, bleaching of our reefs due to the rise in the ocean temperature. Clearly, it's cause for concern because if they're stressed too much, they will die eventually.
yeah, and I
you
think
know.
this is a good initiative.
to do
Probably they
that.
could expand
Excellent.
it in all our different
Yeah,
days.
because I
and
want
so
to
that
compliment the Rotary. This weekend they had what? Carols by Candlelight. I was there. I didn't see you.
No, I couldn't make it, unfortunately.
But it was well attended. It was produced by Keynes Douglas, Ricky. Excellent. And I mean, the patrons were children, adults, teen. You know, it was a beautiful show, and I want to compliment them for this. They made a lot of money, and I know that they utilize this for community purposes, development. So kudos to the Rotary for a well put together event
and produced event.
Produced event, excellent. My first time, by the way.
Okay, so I've been many times.
I'll be going back.
Yes. Could I end on this issue of?
Sure.
I saw our friend Attorney Anselm Crowden.
Yeah.
Articulating and suggesting that we move high court matters where it is judged by a judge only and not juries.
Yeah, I heard that.
Right. He's articulating that because he wants to see, well, he believes that it will be more efficient. And of course, the selection of juries, the cost of juries and all of that.
We had a juror that was jailed, had to spend 48 hours in jail. You saw that 2 weeks ago because he or she, I don't know, was conversing with another. And that's a no-no.
Yeah, so, I mean, there are always pros and cons of these things. We haven't examined
But what would you
the pros and
prefer?
cons.
What would you prefer?
No, I don't think there's, in my view, there's not a preference. I think it's the matter and how it comes up, because they say you must be judged by your peers.
Yes.
And that is part of the justice system and equity of justice.
Yeah.
But there are some matters sometimes based on the complexity, a judge may be better skilled to do it because of the knowledge of the law and how the precedents exist for certain matters. He's suggesting this for criminal matters so that the criminal matters side will be more efficiently and faster handled, and then releases the amount of backlog on the civil side.
Only in appeals you have multiple judges.
Yeah, in appeals you have multiple
judges.
Yeah,
but in this case you will have a single judge.
A single judge,
making
adjudicating on the matter. So I suppose it's something that will come up for further discussion.
Okay. Viewers, we have to take a short break. When we get back, we'll be talking budget. Stay with us, we'll be right back.
Imagine a Christmas where you decide the gifts. Win exquisite furniture, delectable festive food, and a vibrant house facelift. The best part? You choose how much of each you desire, tailoring your perfect Christmas blend. Simply shop with us this festive season, and you could be one of many lucky winners. Whether you engage online, join our community events, or shop in store, multiple ways lead to winning. And every week, win delightful surprises just for being a part of our festive spirit. Real Value IGA Supermarket, where you tailor and we deliver the Christmas magic.
Old Grenada, New Grenada, One Grenada. We get set for the Kamahorn Folk Festival 2023. 3 days of song, drums, music, and everything else that defines us as a people. December 8th to the 10th. 3 days of fun-filled activities such as bus terminal. We're kicking off on day 1, December 8th, with the opening ceremony, Flambeau March, and a host of cultural items. Day 2, Saturday the 9th. It's all day. We start with breakfast from 6 a.m. Beach activities, traditional mass, music night, featuring some of the Caribbean's legend, Lord Nelson, along with Pink Panther, Boise, Woodsman Kelly, Lady Cinti, and more. Then on day 3, Sunday, December 10th, it's Folk Night, as we welcome La Catco Dance Company from Jamaica, traditional drumming, school folk choir, folk dancing, and don't forget, embedded into the Kamahorn Folk Festival on Saturday and Sunday, the Buy Local Expo, organized by the Ministry of Trade. So grab your friends, the entire family, and head on to the Sutter's Bus Terminal for the Kamahorn Folk Festival 2023. Brought to you by the Ministry of Education, Youth, Sports, and Culture. Follow us on social media for more info.
looking to rent chairs and tables? Then call Waggy T Rentals. We rent tables and chairs for any event. We have 7 different types of chairs: plastic, folding chairs, gray and white, resin white chairs, conference chairs, even Shivari chairs in gold and white. We also rent 6 feet and 8 feet rectangular folding tables, 4 feet and 5 feet round tables, and even cocktail tables. Give us a call at 444-RENT. That's 444-7368. Or visit our office at Frequente Industrial Park, Grand St. George.
Welcome back, viewers. As indicated earlier on, for the rest of the program, Chris and I will be discussing the budget as presented last Monday by the Minister of Finance, the theme being Grenada at 50, empowering our people, transforming our nation. Chris, as a parliamentarian, past parliamentarian, you've been there for what, 20 years? I always say, it looks like 20 years, 15.
No, yes.
Okay, 15. You used to going through the exercise rather, of dissecting budgets and, looking at it much more than a layman like myself, layperson as myself, so I'm going to throw it at you to start. In terms of an overview, what's your take on the budget?
Well, let me just say at the onset, I think it has been a relatively good budget.
Yeah.
There are areas that we have concerns about, and
Yeah.
we'll get to that later on.
Yeah.
But when you look at the macroeconomic indicators that we're coming off on for 2023, for example, growth in the economy, GDP of 5.6%, inflation steadying between 2 and 3%, more to the 2-point-something%,
Yeah.
2.3, I think. When you look at indicators of the debt reduction in the 60s, percent of GDP, the IMF reports and the strength of the economy, where it has grown in terms of it's being led by construction, tourism, CBI, in the most part, and of course agriculture and education services haven't been mentioned at all. So when you look at those kind of indicators, and I haven't been able to see the revenue outturn for 2023 and the predictions to the end of the year. So that'll be something interesting to look at, and how strong that has been based on the collections and the compliance on the various tax types. Of course, they have not announced any new taxes or increase in taxes, except for the license thing that they're increasing by $50, which is minor in the scheme of things. So when you take that context, and you look at it from 2023 to 2024, you could understand why the budget for 2024 has been pegged how it has been pegged. They expect the economic activity to continue into 2024. There was a number of projects that they have listed that they expect is ongoing and expected to get in greater maturity as we move along. And you look at that, and although I have my concerns about the GDP growth of 3.6 for 2024, and we're going to end at, say, 5.6, is a huge difference in terms of GDP growth, and that is a reflection. The higher the GDP growth is, the more economic activity the economy is expected to see, and hence the taxes. So the robust collection of taxes being predicted for 2023 is something that we need to look at. So overall, Byron, I will say that is my initial take for the 2024 budget. I believe the sectors that they have chosen, tourism, CBI, and construction, is a little bit concerning, because, as you know, how fickle tourism can be. One event worldwide, not even our own control in the major countries where we get our tourists, could affect that sector. Airlift seems to be relatively strong based on the fact that they're going to be having more rooms available, high-class rooms, high-end rooms. So that is one, and of course, construction is one that has its peaks and its troughs, because when you have large projects taking place, you have a lot of activity going on, and cross-border taxes based on construction material brought in will be good. But when those projects end, what happens and what takes over? And that's why we always say we need a sector of the economy that is a productive sector, so that you keep having value added and keep growing people to get to the sector. And unemployment. Unemployment, as I said, I believe it's lower than 12% because agriculture is struggling to get people, and I don't think the minimum wage will help. Construction struggling to get good people and technical people to work. And again, minimum wage in my view won't help. The tourism sector struggling with staffing because with all these new hotels coming on, there isn't good quality people at middle management and even lower.
And this is where, of course, training, TVET, the National Training Agency, and others will have to come in, and I think we're going to have them soon on the program, Chris.
Yeah.
Chris, the other area is, one of the areas that you're always looking for in a budget is the whole issue of poverty alleviation, that I've noticed. But we can't hide from it that the last Poverty and Equity World Bank report that we have is talking about 25% of our population in poverty, and extreme poverty is making small increases. So I was looking at the budget in terms of what are the specific policies there to reduce poverty. It's probably there, but it wasn't addressed as that.
Sorry, let me interject. Remember the Minister of Finance and PS Mike on another area was saying that when the ministers for the particular portfolio comes to the debate,
you'll get details.
You'll get details on the program. Okay. So Minister of Social Services, I suspect is going to
address this,
apart from things like Imani and so on.
Yeah. The other area, Chris, is that, every December, the government, past government, present government, comes to the fore and present a budget. And very few of us glance or reflect on the last budget, because although the current minister gives an overview of the performance, we don't see the details. And yes, maybe as you said, individual minister, but I did a little review of some of the things mentioned last year budget, and I'm just going to ask the question, what's the status of it? So it was reported that the start of renovation for the public library of $800,000 would have been allocated. I have not seen any action there. Yeah. The reimagining of the Imani program, I have not heard of any significant changes or transformation, so to speak, of that program. So that hasn't happened yet. Of course, we know there is going to be a $500 increase with the Imanis, of course, bringing them to what is considered the minimum wage, which is $1,200, Chris? Livable wage. A major upgrading of the National Stadium was due to commence in the first quarter, and lighting works there to start in the first half. This hasn't happened at all. In fact, we have cricket there this month, and it hasn't happened. So we know that in terms of the timing for some of those major things that was outlined was not there. Agriculture is interesting because the major project put forward or outlined last year for 2023 was the Food Security Enhancement Project. This is a $27 million, World Bank project. And that was the flagship project of the government. It was mentioned in this address, but we know that much hasn't happened there. That there's been a lot of teething issues there with this project, so it hasn't really come off the ground. So I'm wondering aloud, MIT, how effective is it there in some of these major projects? The Bureau of Standards, I think they were supposed to get a new lab. For labor, you had the Employment Agency to set up a revised labor code. This was mentioned again this year. This is going to happen next year. A number of things, even with the energy. There's talk about wind farm. There was talk about the Grenada Resilient Improvement Project, 15 million, reconstruction of Balthazar Bridge. A number of projects. So that's part of the reality, but I'm saying that we will get to know in the individual presentations from ministers and ministry reasons for delays and where there was. Because you recall, Chris, the World Bank project, the World Bank report, staff report, talks about delays in implementation, and so they anticipate there would be a larger than anticipated surplus available as a result of
Well, I think the Minister of Finance mentioned the UK SIF project as a particular one that the last government lost funding because of implementation, slow implementation. And I am not certain that the implementation rate is at a figure. I know the last time this was raised publicly, they said it's at 60-something%. But overall on the PSIP program, what is it? And I don't know that implementation rate have changed with a particular ministry in charge of it and what is happening there. Because the other thing I like people to consider is that when you talk about implementation of projects and getting them off the ground, it is an issue of capacity. Capacity from the point of view of, just take human resource and equipment. Do we have the level of tractors and heavy equipment in the country to move those projects to an implementation rate of higher than 60 and 70%? Do we have the human resource technical people, the engineers and the contractors and so on to do it? And I don't think I've seen it. I haven't seen an influx of equipment or anything to say that we could deploy.
So having a ministry doesn't necessarily change this reality.
Well, it may help with the bureaucracy. But whether or not, and we still have procurement rules and laws to follow. Right? So you can't do things much outside of that. So there is some things happening, but they're not happening probably at the pace.
So I think too, as part of our culture, we always project more than we're not realistic, I would say, in projecting. And I'm familiar with this in projects and project environments. It always happens. You project, it seems feasible, but whatever can go wrong goes wrong. You know?
And when you look at the implementation of the GCFF project with NAWASA and so on, remember we have a whole GIZ technocrats coming in to assist with the technical part of the project and so on, so that it could speed up and the monies could get used in the time frame that's allotted. So on the public service side, you're not seeing the same energy, in my view.
Chris, on a positive note, I was pleased to hear the minister indicated that some 100 directors have been trained, accredited. They've been accredited now, having been trained as directors for statutory bodies and other institutions. This is excellent, because this is the way we have to go. It must not be there by favor. It must be there based on your ability, and that you understand your function and purpose. So I want to give the government high marks for this initiative.
Absolutely.
It makes a lot of sense.
I want to add on that though. We can't train people to become accredited directors and expect good quality work and we pay them peanuts.
Oh, director's fees.
That's right.
Must go together.
That's right.
Reasonable.
Right. So we can't have a director come into, given of his time and his expertise, and pay him $150 or $120.
And this training costs, well, some years ago, it was $5,000. And now I'm sure it's probably $10,000 for this training.
ECCB would have put on quite a few of them, so probably they got it at a discount.
At a discount,
So.
But kudos, I think clearly that's the way to go. One of the things I saw on the cannabis, well, agriculture in general, Chris, again, the project, the 27, the World Bank project is now there, and I really hope that they would have got through a lot of the teething problems and implementation can really happen in 2024. But we heard that the cannabis industry, the minister talked about that this will, the legalization would happen in the first quarter. Mr. Clouden did tell us it would happen by independence, so that's in the first quarter. But Chris, part of the project where the minister would have talked about our export efficiencies, I took a look at these numbers, Chris, and it's going up. That export now is $35 million US, whereas imports is $446 million US. So our export represent only 8% of our imports. So it's minuscule, it's very small. And people must understand that the biggest imports countries is America, with some 170 plus million, 75 million, and Trinidad and Tobago, 77 million. A lot of it is food, Chris. And in food, in terms of meat and processed foods, you're looking at over $73 million. Yeah. So when we talk about, the minister spoke about how we can increase our export, but we have to look at a strategy, a joint strategy of import substitution, particularly in the food sector or food markets. And I think we could do more in that area. A lot of the large hotels are importing their foods also. So the question is how we can reduce our import bill, food in particular, Chris, you know. And I didn't see a heavy focus on that because that will go well for agriculture and the farming community.
Well, let me start off by saying the budget allocates $46 million for agriculture.
Yeah.
That includes, I think, the 27 million. So if you minus the 27 million, we're talking about probably about 13, and then he included the roads. If you take the roads and the farm roads, so really and truly, agriculture is getting about $10 million in this budget, right? Which he said in the speech. So again, I think it's a paltry sum for agriculture as a major productive sector. And when you look at what you were just saying, and to address the issue of exporting in agriculture and to increase exports, we have traditionally had issues with our exports was banana, nutmeg, and cocoa. Banana is out of the game, and now it's cocoa and nutmeg, and we have having a lot of issues with cocoa now. And what is happening with cocoa, unfortunately, the good thing is that we have value add in cocoa and the chocolaters that we have around. But then there is the marketing board concept, the marketing board aspect, which is supposed to be one of the major institutions that will look at how we export and what we export and the quality of what we export. And let that filter down to the farmers so farmers could know what to plant, how to plant it, and how to reap. Soursop being one, golden apples being one, mangoes being one, dasheen being one. How do we get the farmers to efficiently do that? And without a marketing board, there is no way they could do it. Yes, the budget addresses the marketing board issue and what is going to happen there in a sort of private-public formula. But and they talk about a new financing package for marketing board, which is all good.
Yes, I thought so, and this should happen by June of next year. This is welcome.
Yeah, and you know,
it may be a strategic partner, and I must say this is something that's been contemplated many years ago. It makes sense.
Yes, and the thing is with marketing board, it has to be run as a business and a business that is profitable. And a lot of people talk about, oh, they must have depots and sautés and this and that. But if these things are loss makers, then from a private sector point of view and from a business point of view, you have to make the footprint of marketing board different. The project concept has to be different. And remember, a huge part of marketing board income on the revenue side, 51% or more is from commodities.
From commodities, that's correct.
Not fresh produce. And what farmers plant and sell.
Rice, sugar, rice.
That's right, sugar, milk, and so on. So at the end of the day, we need to properly understand what marketing board's purpose is. And let me tell you something about marketing board and exports. Let us assume, for example, we were to send a 20-foot container of golden apples, leaves Grenada nice and in proper order, properly washed and cleaned and so on and sanitized. It gets to Miami, and when it lands, the person who sent it to Miami tell you we have 50% loss.
It's true. Same thing. Exactly. And it happens in fish a lot. I used to volunteer on the Southern Fishermen Association, and there was a year where they lost millions of dollars.
But Byron,
because it left us grade 1. Let me
tell you what I can't understand.
Left us grade 1, and when it got there, they said it's grade 3.
Right, and what I can't understand is we do have nobody in those markets working for us independently to say what they're saying is true. Now, how could you?
No independent verification.
That is a mind-boggling thing. So if we want to get to these levels of export that we're talking about in agriculture, we need to properly set up our arrangements. Similarly for agro-processing. There wasn't much mention of it in the budget. I think there was a line or two on agro-processing, but
there's something within the same World Bank project in the ministry. There is support there.
But I always like to use the example that we have. You know, when we go to the Japanese for assistance, they give us lovely fish markets with a reef. and a jetty.
Jetty.
And they may give us cold storage and all of that.
Yeah, they do.
That's beautiful.
That's the history.
But we have never asked, in my understanding, why we can't get a processing plant in the back.
Plant.
So when we have third grade tuna, we could process it and can it. I mean, come on.
So, Chris, you're talking about the blue economy, and that's important. The budget talks about this.
Yeah.
I worry about it a bit, Chris. Let me tell you why. I know in the past 2 weeks, we've imported fish, container fish, out of Barbados. Yeah. Very little fish in the local market in terms of supplying. So we have an issue there. How we manage these resources. But going back to the mainstream agriculture, Chris, we're importing everything from cabbage to lettuce to name it. We're importing. So I would like to see, we probably need a forum just to deal with that in itself.
I was just saying the magic word, greenhouse.
Greenhouse.
And the investment in
clearly,
greenhouse. So we have more control conditions, both for watering, disease control, with greater efficiencies, and we have some farmers doing growing lettuce under greenhouse conditions, and these farmers do extremely well, and they always have lettuce.
Of course.
You understand? So similarly for cabbage and sweet peppers and so on, why can't we transition there and have agriculture deal with that in terms of having a consistent supply? Start with the vegetables.
Precisely.
Right?
That's
carrots,
easier
this, that, and so on. And then we could escalate it and see what happens. And the hotels are willing, in my view and my understanding, to give us seeds free of cost to try different varieties of lettuce, this and that and the other. And grow things specific to them in terms of the seasoning. Seasonings is a big business.
Big business, business.
The type of peppers, the type of... So, I think there is so much potential, but there's not a focused way of getting at it and getting farmers, because farmers is about cash and having cash readily available for them when they sell their produce. So the issue is, how do we marry that properly with production discipline?
So this is what I'm saying. So we had to see. I'm waiting for the minister's presentation and what he's saying about the sector, but
and I'm waiting to hear for fisheries too, because it's very
fisheries.
little spoken about fisheries.
Exactly, but we have to take a short break, Chris. Viewers, stay with us. We'll be right back.
Concerned about your general health and wellness?
Do you need to know your complete blood count, lipid profile, or HbA1c?
Maybe you're an athlete or work in an environment that requires regular drug screening.
Interested in STI screening? What about renal, liver, or thyroid tests?
All these tests, plus hundreds more, are available at Allied Laboratories.
At Allied Laboratories, we are committed to providing the best service with accurate results. We now have 3 fully equipped locations to better serve you. You can contact our Grand Anse branch at 403-3488. You can contact our Grenville branch at 410-3488. Or you can contact our newest addition, the Guelph branch, at 404-3488. Or send us an email.
We're taking care of Grenada.
Holy Natural Spring Water is a water for every occasion. On the field of sports, at your workplace, just open the bottle and savor the pure, refreshing taste. Holy Natural Spring Water is produced in Mama Can St. Andrews and is available in all sizes nationwide. To order, telephone 444-7654 or 533-7654. Holy Natural Spring Water, Grenada's purest bottled water.
Something legendary stirs on the horizon.
Greetings in the name of His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie.
Saturday, December 23rd, the National Cricket Stadium. A night unlike any other. Can you feel it? From the heart of reggae, rising like a phoenix, the unmatched, the unparalleled Sizzla. But hold on, who else will be on the stage? Can you guess? It's a reggae explosion inside a December to remember. The suspense will lift and history will be made. Are you ready to be part of the legend that is Sizzla?
Are you looking to rent chairs and tables? Then call Waggy T Rentals. We rent tables and chairs for any event. We have 7 different types of chairs: plastic, folding chairs, gray and white, resin white chairs, conference chairs, even Shivari chairs in gold and white. We also rent 6 feet and 8 feet rectangular folding tables, 4 feet and 5 feet round tables, and even cocktail tables. Give us a call at 444-RENT. That's 444-7368. Or visit our office at Frequente Industrial Park, Granite, St. George.
Welcome back, viewers, to Community Forum. Chris, well, during the break, one viewer in the commentary said we should import agricultural workers. You've talked about this before, and they also said, like, hey, talk is cheap, you know, you could say a lot if you want. But Chris, let's move on to some of the private sector. Some things I mentioned, and probably you could comment on it. They talked about some measures to merge the Grenada Development Bank and the GIDC. Of course, we know the GIDC is more of a development institution, performing a lot of training and small business support also. Of course, GIDC, the bank, is more of a financing institution. So with specific mandate, the GIDC is more fostering, it has a relationship with a lot of the concessions and investments in particular, yeah. So exactly. So how is this going to work in your view? But also, from broadly speaking, how is the budget addressing the private sector issues?
All right. So let me start off with this. I think the minister used the wrong word. I may be bold to say merging the two. I don't see it as a merger. I see it as a deepening partnership between the two.
Which makes sense in my view.
Yes, because as you rightfully said, one is a financial institution providing financing, and that is how the statutory and the laws are set up. Whereas GIDC is going out there to get investment, deal with investors, provide training at a micro and medium level to help businesses in that sector, as well as look at the concessionary arrangements we have and how we could better implement that for the government and so forth. So I think it's more, in my view, I think it's a deepening of the partnership, because both should work in tandem with what is happening all day. Generally, I believe when we look at the private sector issues in the budget, the positive side of it is for us in the private sector that there is no major change in the fiscal rules in terms of taxes, whether corporation tax, stamp tax, personal income tax, and so on. There is no major move to either increase the rate or increase the tax or whatever, even to lower the threshold in PIT. So there's no change, which is a good thing for us from the point of view of predictability and understanding the environment, so we can plan better when it comes for our taxes. The major concern for us in the private sector, of course, there isn't any direct initiative for the private sector, except to say in the budget there is the issue of the announcement of projects, the Kiwana Bay project, Six Senses Hotel, the Silver Sands Beach
Tourism sector is great potential for growth.
And the expectation is that the spin-offs from that will come to the private sector through construction materials and other services. But we also have to recognize that a lot of these projects get serious concessions from the government.
So that's what they mean when they say expansion of the stimulus for non-public sector projects?
Well, it has to be, because when you give these concessions, a lot of these projects bring in their stuff, and the private sector get very little spin-off. In rare instances, some of us will get paint, some of us will get steel, but they're bringing a lot of this stuff, high-end stuff, the tiles, the this, and that. So there is some, so that is one of the criticisms, is not directly for us. The Kiwana Bay issue, I think there's a lot of questions surrounding that. There appears to have been a swap with the Rivera land and paying $8 million US for lease rights or leasehold rights in the Kiwana Bay project. And what's happening there, I think a lot of questions in terms of the kind of monies involved could be raised, some concern there. And of course, for me, one of the concerns I have with the budget is the level of spending that is being projected for 2024. And I could list a few of them just to get, and that's not all. we could start in the bottom, increase for parliamentarians and where
Yes.
that is going.
Yeah.
I accept it's something needed and must be done. But again, it's a rationalization of public sector workers. There are a lot of thousands they're talking about in our
Yeah, I
face.
think 300 in the first instance, then 1450, and then
Right.
3005.
That is
They
people
do it in
coming onto the
three
public sector wage bill.
But you have pension reform in
And you have
this
pension reform
form.
coming.
Yeah.
That you have the free tuition programs for TAMCC and
Which, Chris,
NULO.
let me pause on that. Pause. This is a great thing, let me tell you. Particularly with NULO, I am pleased to see NULO getting this level of support, because there's a lot of young persons in particular
Correct.
who wanted to attend NULO, technical training, and simply could not afford it. Because NULO is doing excellent service. to
Absolutely
Grenada.
agree with you.
And I want to compliment NULO, kudos NULO for that job they're doing.
And I have no problem with that.
Right.
And what we supporting,
I'm not saying I have a problem with it, but I think I need to
I'm just trying to cite
know
how-
that. I
how
know that, Chris, but I just need to, as you
Because-
mentioned their name, it jumps to me.
in the budget,
Um,
when you look at the macroeconomic spends,
Yeah.
we put a budget for 1.6 billion.
Yeah.
But when you look at the recurrent expenditure, it's almost $1 billion.
That's correct.
Right,
It's,
so it is, if it's taken in all of these things,
Yeah.
and remember the budget is a budget, we didn't have the money yet. We had to raise
You had
the
to
money.
raise the money.
So when Mike and the PS and his team, and I have full confidence in the team and their figures and their expertise, it's not about questioning that, it's about how you see things happening. Two things, Byron. You are projecting a GDP of 5.6 this year, which is going to reflect in the economic activity.
Yeah.
You're projecting 3.6 next year, not even 4. So you're suggesting that the downside
Side,
risks,
yes.
based on what's happening in the international community and so on, is going to affect you, that you have
Yeah.
a drop in GDP, or
Yeah.
you're being extremely conservative. That cannot translate to the economic activity that will keep the revenue streams on the different tax types buoyant and robust.
Chris, and also I want to hold your point, but I also want to come in here to talk about revenue stream. Our huge dependency on the CBI program. What percentage of our recurrent expenditure is that covering?
I don't know, because it really
But it's
depends.
pretty high in
It
terms
really-
of what that revenue is projecting.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a lot dependent on what the drawdowns from the NTF is going to be.
Yeah.
The minister indicated that the resilience fund they're setting up at the ECCB is at
$19 million, yes, yeah.
and they expect to keep on doing that and
Yeah.
increasing it
Yeah.
in case of the shocks that we
Yeah.
may have to the
Yeah.
economy. and we haven't spoken much about the downside risks. But let's look at CBI. CBI still is at a position where I'm informed that, you know, the rate of processing of applications is not at the rate that it needs to be.
So 2 months now?
Forget all about what is happening on the OECD front
yeah.
and the European front. They're
Mhm.
trying to stymify the programs and so on. But we, and I say we because when I was there at CBI, it was at a point where we were digitizing the entire application process.
Yeah.
And it appears that that is not progressing at the speed it ought to.
Yeah.
And hence, we are not processing like Antigua and these countries that have CBI and Dominica that are doing 3,000 and 4,000 applications a year. Grenada still to get to 2,000 or thereabout.
Yes.
And that is part of the problem. And you could say that we have one of the most robust compliance review for applications, and that is positive. But the whole process of digitizing the mundane aspect of the application process should have been far advanced, or more advanced, I should say. That will give us a greater efficiency of processing applications. Let us hope that in this new budget, that is what it's going to be about. And the chairman of CBI, my good friend, is going to push that. The other thing with CBI is the regularization of the Act. The Act has CBI as a department of government, right? It needs to be changed to make them a statutory body, so that they have more autonomy, more flexibilities in how they handle their affairs and so on, so that it doesn't cause that level of inefficiency as far, and they have been clamoring for it to be a one-stop shop, so that everything can happen under the CBI program, get your passports, do the processing, all of that, fees, NTF, administering of the different funds and so on.
Yeah.
I say all that to say that my concern about the budget and the revenues intake.
So as you talk about the revenues, something I identify here, that total grants is $105 million dollars. I think it's low. And I would like to see greater focus in accessing grants financing, particularly in the climate action area. You have this new one that's set up there, but you have the Green Climate Fund, GCI, you have the Adaptation Fund, and I know we have an application between the Adaptation Fund for at least $10 million grant, and I know it's preliminary approval already. But I'm just saying that we need to look at how we can raise softer money, grant money. And this is a whole skill in itself, the techniques in itself. There are persons with the know how to do this. It's available.
This is
the question
concern,
is, and Chris, just the final point I want to make there is, we are not accredited to some, so for example, if we use the Adaptation Fund, we're not accredited to it, so we have to go through IFAD or some other institution.
Financial institutions are looking to get their accreditation.
That's important, I think, the development bank, but this is something we need to, because we are losing money, because when you go through third parties, they charge you for it, Chris.
And that's the other concern, and I say this on the reservation, and that I haven't seen the debt strategy paper, I haven't seen the medium-term strategy paper, and the risk profile. So I haven't seen these papers. So what I'm going to say is against the background. I haven't seen it. But when you look at the grant funding, now normally the recurrent surplus is used to help fund the PSIP program, so that we do less borrowing. And if the grant funding is low, as it's continuing to decrease over the years, because more countries are just not giving grants anymore, and they want to tie the grants into a lot of other issues, like what we spoke about with the Samoa Agreement. So the issue is, if we go in for more loans at good concessionary rates, as the minister mentioned,
like the Saudi grant, like the Saudi loan, for example, this is highly
where is our debt to GDP going? It was at 64% coming into 2023. Is it getting higher? And there have always been this debate about, if you could afford to pay, you could take your loans because you could afford to pay. So that is something that we have to consider as well. But then the minister mentioned about the SD rating that we have, the selective default, and what they're trying to do to rectify that with payments to Libya, payments to Trinidad, and work out an arrangement so that they could get their credit rating to rise to a higher level. And that is all to try and get better loan conditions in terms of moratorium, interest rates, and all of that. And he mentioned the issue of they putting in the clause now that in case of a crisis like we had in Ivan, there will be a relief in terms of payments and all of that. So these are good things. I'm just saying the concern is, because I've not seen these other papers, you're not sure how all of them are meshing to give us the comfort that what we are projecting for 2024 in terms of the 1.6 billion spend. We could get the revenues to meet that. Right? Because if you're projecting a surplus of 300 million, it means that we're spending 1 billion, almost a billion, 900 and something million. So there's an excess of about 700 million. And if you're using that to support the PSIP, then what is happening for your social programs, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a lot of that to consider when we're looking at the budget in some detail. And so those are some of the concerns I have.
Staying with private sector, when they talk about promoting private sector development, they talk about the Kawana Bay project development. The fact that Silver Sands, I understand, is now coming on board with this project, I think that's a good thing. I mean, this is a reputable developer, and so
they're using CBI as well.
Exactly, yes. So that's a real good thing. They talk about airlift. We talked about that, but also things like youth and agriculture and the hospitality sector. One of the areas, Chris, that was health services.
Before you leave there, the one thing I want to say on the private sector, the government have decided to expand the programs on the GDB for small and micro. In terms of funding them and funding projects that touch agriculture to some degree, touch services and so on. Excellent. Nothing is wrong with that. You support that, and that's an excellent move. The reduction of registration fees for businesses, new businesses, by 50%. Excellent for small and micro, because it could be a costly event. And of course, the incentive program, the concession program for incentives, there's a review going on, there's a committee in place, and they're looking at the whole program to see how they could adjust it and make it more efficient, and at the same time, don't necessarily have government losing a lot of revenue. Okay, remember, we make it corporation tax suspensions and for a period of time and so on and so forth. So these are all things that they need to, is positive from that point of view, but at the same time impacts the revenue. And again, here we come with this revenue talk and the spend and what is going to happen there and the ability to have monies to meet all that they want to do. A lot of them good projects and good initiatives. We're not criticizing it from that point of view, but of course is what
Let's see
is
how
happening.
it comes out.
That's right.
Chris, when I talk about climate resilience, and I just want to touch on that, one of the things is electrical vehicles, no duties.
Yes.
That's an excellent initiative.
I
but
thought that was one of the best announcements in the budget.
makes
When
sense.
I was asked what was one of the positive things,
Yeah.
I cited that.
Okay, you did. The electricity, talking about renewable energy, and they're talking about a 17 megawatt
Solar farm.
in Carriacou, is it?
And
Grenada.
yeah,
But one of the things that I saw, Chris, and I have to talk about this, that part of this solar farm in Carriacou has been established at Limle and in Carriacou, which is a state farm, a government farm. And for me, they were using prime agricultural land. And this goes back to the past government also, and we see a continuation there. Using prime agricultural land to set up your solar farm. For me, that's bad business.
And actually, I'm going to challenge you here now.
Well, let me finish. You have to use your marginal lands. I know your location matters, the direction of the sun and so forth, but you can't use your best lands for that. We have limited, and this is where a land use policy matters. Now, if we had a land use policy, Limle Carriacou would have been designated, because that's where the project to set up a stud farm, where we have the best sheep, black belly sheep, and other ruminants and so on. We could demonstrate there and a development.
So let me tell you, there's a technology now, Byron, that putting up a solar farm doesn't mean that the prime land cannot be used for cultivation.
But what's set up there now, it can't be used anymore, Chris.
No, well,
That's
I
the
just
point.
say there's
technology
technology
now.
available
Yeah.
that you could set up your solar panels. And the solar panels will be set up in such a way that you could still use the land for farming and getting the best out of the land.
Excellent. I agree with
And
that.
that's the technology. I'll send you the paper on it so you can take a
But that's
for your farm as well.
that's not what's happening in Limle Carriacou. And I know that the agricultural people there were debating with the government, and it went ahead. I myself made some representation on this because I was there, and it made no sense to me. I couldn't see the economics.
Well, let's go back to the EV vehicles and so on, because
Yes.
I think that is one of the best things that came out of the budget.
Yes.
No duties and 25% on hybrids.
Yes.
I think that is going to push us into that area where our carbon footprint will reduce, the maintenance. Think about the fuel and the cost of fuel to run fuel vehicles. Now, if you go to EV, there's no longer that issue. The issue becomes charging.
You still have to burn fossil fuel, Chris, to generate electricity.
No.
If you're using solar.
That's what we're coming to.
Okay.
So when you're doing that, and the government intends to lead this by changing out their fleet,
Right.
you set up charging ports at different, and you can have rapid charging ports now that charge within 15 minutes.
Short time,
And it doesn't have to be overnight. And you use the park in most areas, as Greenock is using. Greenock have shades built up, all of them solar, and they have charging ports, so it's nothing about burning electricity anymore. You're using your solar panels.
No, I agree. That's the way to go. I mean, we have to go there in a big way.
I'm just saying that
Chris.
was a great announcement by the.
Yes.
mean, I could see hoping that a lot of our car dealers start moving to EV, 100% EV. And the cost is going to be significantly less with the waiving of all these duties.
Precisely.
Right?
Precisely.
And CET
makes
and so on.
makes it affordable.
So I see that as a positive thing.
Chris, we run out of time, but 50th Jubilee celebration, 15 million, strengthening parliamentary rep. You think by paying our parliamentary rep more money that we strengthen their representation, Chris? You think?
Well, one thing I think it may do, it may attract better people to the parliament. Working for $862 that I did many years, and I used to be ashamed to say that. But the fact that we know senators are going to get 3,500, and it's across the board, opposition and representatives 5,000. The $120,000 a year, $10,000 per constituency is nothing very new. It was on a parliament before the transition to the Prime Minister's ministry. So,
and Chris, 25% ex gratia for all civil servants. It's a good thing for Christmas, but it's a bit ad hoc, though, Chris. And you think that may have come from the savings surplus
Oh yes.
savings,
I mean,
yeah.
government, remember, they're going to pay early on the 15th.
But next year is not automatic. What they say is,
That's
look,
correct.
they're going to be
It's a one-off.
next year. It would be on the basis of performance.
Because they're putting in a performance system.
That's all the time we have, Chris. Viewers, thank you very much for being with us. We're out of time. We'll see you next week, same time. Bye bye. Have a good week. Bye bye.